Welcome to the Highlight Show, Series 1, The Tree Lady Talks, and this one is a bit different. It's not a single interview, it's highlights of some of the interviews that Sharon, the Tree Lady, has done over the course of the first series, and just going around an awful lot of tables in a restaurant that we booked. Obviously nobody can come down here physically to see us, but what we've done is we've put the computer screen on each table with their interview on it, and we're going to be popping around picking out some of the marvellous people who've been interviewed in this first series. Now, Sharon doesn't know anything about it, so it's going to be absolutely hilarious what happens. We've got the band playing, it's all going on, and it sounds like there's quite an atmosphere building up already. We've got to get in because the Master of Ceremonies is going to introduce Sharon. We're just going in now.
Ladies and gentlemen,
here we go.
Please welcome to the stage the man behind Tree Lady Talks. With his wife,
not me,
the Tree Lady herself.
What have you done?
Give a huge welcome to Noel. Oh. Where did the 80s go? God, follow me.
I'll get you for this later. Oh wait, game face. Hello everybody, hello, hi, thank you. Enough with the triangle, dear God. It's good to see so many familiar faces on the tables in the TV monitors. Just to explain what's happening, we've got 20 tables here, 20 TV screens, and our interviews with everybody that we've been doing this season have been put on those monitors, and we're going to walk around and just pick out some of the highlights of the interviews that you did. Mostly they'll be dream scenarios, but I can see John Parker over there in the corner. Right, John? Oh yes, there's some mountaineering gear. That'll be James Ogilvie. Fantastic interview you did with him, Seven Summits man.
And my kids think I'm a dinosaur because...
Oh, enough of the dinosaur. James. Featured in episode 8 for Tree Aid. There's the Tree Lady Talks band just busking away in the corner, getting another crust for the evening. Give them a little clap, that'll keep them going for the next couple of hours. We get a couple of hours out of them, that'll be good. Most of the music from the Tree Lady Talks podcast, of course, available on Spotify. If you go to the Theme Genies on Spotify, you can get them. You'll be able to download and listen at your leisure to the full-length versions of some of the themes and tunes that they've put together for this series. Thank you, the Tree Lady Talks band. You keep going now. Okay, let's kick it off. I think we should get things underway with John Parker. There he is. John, how you doing? Having a good time?
You know, we're all having fun.
Well, I know John loves a beer. What you got there, John? Looks brilliant.
It's just great.
It's great. Fantastic. It's even better. I picked up something different, actually. It wasn't John's soundbite. It was one of the things he said about media presence and how things get portrayed in the press about tree planting. Let's have a quick listen to this from episode 1.
I think one of the problems we have with the tree planting message we're trying to get across is that you can get a headline if you say we're going to plant 1 million trees. Nobody's ever going to give you a headline for saying this year we're going to properly maintain and establish and mulch 10,000 trees. Yeah. That's not very sexy. We like the sexy numbers of tree planting, and that's what gets the headlines. And it's a bit like we've seen with pests and diseases and everything. You know, the media get onto a new pest and disease and they'll make contact with different people, and they don't want to publish the opinion of the professional who's saying, well, it might be quite bad, but we're hoping we can control it through careful monitoring and management. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear the person going, everything's going to die, it's dangerous, we're going to... And that's the message that gets through.
Okay, so let's thanks John. Have a good night. Yeah, Let's get over to James Ogilvie if we can, because he talked about tree aid in episode 8 of Tree Lady Talks. And it links back to what Jon was saying, really, because when he was in Ethiopia, he spoke about how, if they didn't maintain and help their trees when they planted them, then they wouldn't have any income.
The majority of the world's population now live in the urban areas. And it's tragic to me that we're still seeing developments that don't respect trees and woods. I mean, we all depend on the environment and what it can produce for our survival. And it's easy to living in an urban environment to lose sight of that, but we lose sight of that at our peril. And we're just stewards of the earth. We've got to find a new paradigm in terms of regarding the earth and her resources as something to be exploited. We've got to change to one where we believe it's about stewarding and about passing on to the next generation. Because if we don't do that, frankly, there's not a lot of hope.
On that note, I'll get James a little top up. One more over here, please. Thank you. Oh, no, there's James Canton. James featured with 3 other fantastic interviewees on the Trees in Art and Literature podcast, episode 9. James mentioned that it's been proved that being out in nature actually does help you feel better.
We all are starting to realise through a lot of fantastic research, part of which I include in this book, interviews with an environmental psychologist who, talked us through some of the studies that have taken place showing through EEG patterns in people's brains, that when we are in green places, when we are in green spaces, when we are next to oak trees, we are happier, we are calmer, we are more peaceful.
Sharon interviewed Richard Collins, Director of Landvest, on episode 3 in Development and Nature, and he's on the table with Tracy Clark, Susie Cardy, Catherine Xavier and Josh Daniels. And he pointed out that it's up to developers to work with all the specialisms in the industry to design spaces that actually people would really enjoy living in and are biodiverse as well. And I think he owns his own fire engine too.
Yeah, what sort of consultants do you use, particularly in relation to, not naming names, but in terms of the natural environment and also perhaps considering how people will feel when they live there as well?
We would use an ecologist, and they would do, in terms of the, you mentioned the natural environment, and obviously an arboriculturalist yourself, we have to ensure that we cover any existing trees, any replanting measures, and you mentioned, the public realm element of that from an ecological and an arboricultural perspective is huge, because the natural environment and place making and shaping an environment for a site is huge, and that has become ever more prevalent with what we've been through with the pandemic. You've got to make sure that a development can stand on its own 2 feet and is self-sufficient in everything, whether that's deliveries, now, which is, we were talking yesterday about highways and marrying different uses into a site. So residential, commercial, goods vehicles, HGVs, that element of trying to ensure that the place still is the forefront of how we plan the site, so that when people are walking from the edge of the street down into the site, you've got to make sure that it's an environment within which is safe. They have a safe means of passage to get to their properties, that it is well landscaped, that it is well lit, that is safeguarded in terms of anything that needs to be, thought about in terms of people's day-to-day living. But yeah, so we would consider ecology, we would consider arboriculture, we would consider air quality now, which is a huge part of the planning process. We consider noise, so anything right on cue.
Right on cue. We have sirens going out outside your room.
So that it's the natural environment element of the site now is so multifaceted.
Oh yes, and that got a thumbs up from Jon Ryan, who's the overall tree manager for the London Borough of Islington. John's got a vision, and he'd like to replace some car parking spaces in Islington with trees, and I think that's a great idea. And if all else fails, stick them on building roofs. Now, I know Sharon loves this idea, and so let's hear what he had to say about that.
I want trees on buildings, you know. It's got to be done, Sharon. We've got a very good, strong policy on green roofs and extensive green roofs, and that's being amended to include water attenuation. So once you've got green roof with water attenuation underneath it on a flat roof, you've designed in the overburden that could so easily just be swapped out for soil, and you've got trees on buildings. It can be done. It's being done elsewhere. I really do think that if we're going to hit our targets, I'm very hopeful. We managed to get it into the local plan draft, and hopefully it makes it all the way through, that developers now have to consider trees on buildings. In 5-10 years' time, if we can get them to go, developers have to prove that they can't have trees on buildings, and then 10 years after that, it'll be developers you have to have trees on buildings. It's pushing the onus onto developers to have to pay for these things, but I can't see where else the money's going to come from, Sharon.
Yeah, I think also it's going to make our cities so much more bearable. You know, the temperatures are going to rise. We've got to have more trees to give us more shade, and put them on buildings.
Absolutely.
On balconies. I mean, there's that famous building in Italy.
Bosco Verticale,
that's got to be the way forward.
It's about building resilience.
Certainly what I've picked up as well in a lot of these interviews is that a lot of the people talking to Sharon actually are flabbergasted that they are not represented at government level to guide the policies. And certainly that was the case when Sharon interviewed Cecil Konynendijk and Johan Osberg, and they're from Nature-Based Solutions in episode 4 this series. And they actually want to design cities by putting the nature first and then building the city around it. And here's a little couple of quotes from them.
Do you hope, as the Nature-Based Solutions Institute, to influence government?
Yeah, so we have been working quite a bit before we actually started this institute with government. So I've had the pleasure to work with international organizations like the European Union, but also with governments at national and local level. And there is actually an interest, and people are more interested in developing specific policies. Right now, we are working on with several governments actually in Europe on green space policies and policy development. So definitely an interest. And I think, Johan, you have done quite a bit of work in Sweden, working with local governments, for example. So maybe you want to say a few words about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to add as well, when it comes to this, like the whole knowledge and the information that is out there, I would say that we've never had as much knowledge as we have right now when it comes to how to protect trees and green spaces, how to construct them, how to manage them, the value of them. But we also need to, as Cecil said, disseminate that knowledge to the right people so that they are knowledgeable about it and know how to handle it. And I think that there are also tons of different very innovative projects out there. For example, the background I have here on our Zoom call is from the Western Harbor of the city of Malmö, where they, and that was almost 20 years ago right now, where they was working with open stormwater systems, having greenery into the city, already into the development process. So there are definitely good examples out there, but we need to be better at collaborating and finding those partners that we need to be able to succeed here.
And so, of course, logically, what you need when you've got the trees on the buildings and the ecology all around the cities and everything's going brilliantly, that's when you need Xander Johnson and Vicky Bengtsson. Together, they explain how important insects are in the ecosystem.
My dream scenario would be to have a functioning savanna in Northern Europe. So it would be that we've got old trees, we've got grazing animals, and we've got sites that are interconnected in between them, and we've got tree of all ages and sizes and species in between. The rewilding story that's going on across Europe is something that really is interesting to me, and how we might work with that even in urban and peri-urban areas. Seeing everybody's got an old tree outside their house.
Well, for species like the wood ant, the shining guest ant, and the pine hoverfly, to be honest, it's just for them to thrive again. The wood ant, there's still loads of them, but there could be more. Shining guest ant, to get more data about it and to understand more and see how we can help encourage it into much more wood ants' nests, see if it is in much more wood ants' nests, to try and continue the population. Pine hoverflies, try and get this fungus back. The fungus is what we need to make sure the pine hoverfly continues on surviving and thriving, because without it, we might not have the key to making sure that this species continues on. All these individual species have their own very needs, but a lot of it comes back to managed forestry. Managed forestry is a massive problem in our year and in this time period. And it's cutting down trees, cutting down habitats to make space for humans, for us. And if we had stopped doing a bit of that, then we could actually have more nature that could make more space for us, and more nature that could help us continue on. Because without insects, nothing would survive, including us. Insects are the foundation of the whole ecosystem.
Vicky Benson and Xander Johnson in episode 7 Tree Lady Talks, Trees, Ecology and Rare Insects. Now, for those of you who listen regularly to us, you will have noticed that I do like to do a bit of an intro, sometimes when I get the opportunity, when I'm allowed to. And one episode I was definitely allowed to do one on was Pete Wharton. Now, Pete's the founder of Wharton Natural Infrastructure. He's a great supporter of the podcast and arboriculture in general. Sharon had told me that we were interviewing Pete Wharton, and I mistakenly thought that she'd said Pete Waterman, who I'd worked with a long time ago in the music business. And I decided to create a studio atmosphere, and this is what happened. Okay, everybody, welcome back. We're going to take it from the top, but Steve, first, can you give me just a bit of bass drum? Thank you. Okay, Steve, that's great. So, is everybody happy in the studio?
How much are we paying these people?
Good. Okay. Right, we're going to run it from the top. Make sure this is a good one, lads. We've got the King of Northern Soul coming in, so it's got to be spot on. Oh, he's going to love it. He's going to love it. More bass drum. Give me more bass drum. Okay, bring the claps in. Loving it, loving it, loving it. Come on. Oh, this is great, great. Oh, hold on, studio, stop. Well, if it isn't the tree lady herself.
Well, this is sounding great. What is it?
You'll never guess. I'm writing a song for your guest on the podcast today.
Who? Pete Wharton?
Yes, Pete Waterman. It's right up his street. It's going to be a huge hit.
But it's not
You'll
Pete
love
Waterman.
the chorus. It's absolutely huge. What do you mean it's not Pete Waterman?
It's Pete Wharton.
Definitely?
Yes.
Oh, God, so what am I going to do with all these musicians then?
I don't know. Tell him to go and do musician things.
Here's Pete's soundbite from episode 10 of Tree Lady Talks, Environmental Business Matters.
So finally, Pete, what's your dream scenario?
My dream scenario is really for the environmental world, the environmental consultancies to be around the table when big planning decisions are made, to be actual people who are steering design through the expertise that we have within our industry of how we live, work and play. We have people talking about it continually. We now have to actually take this time and actually influence the decision makers and ensure that it's done correctly.
Pete was great, and I thank him for that. It was really good fun to do. On another occasion, we were interviewing Henry Kuppen. Henry is a director of Terra Nostra in Holland, and we've worked with him before and know him quite well. And so I decided, it was a Christmas episode, I decided to put Sharon in a Christmas market in Holland and have her singing a Christmas carol to see if Henry could find her. And I had her sing it in Dutch. Thank you for joining us for the first Christmas episode of the Tree Lady Talks, and today I'm nervous.
Very good.
I'm nervous because I'm walking into a Christmas market because Sharon has said that she is dressing up as Mrs. Christmas. And she says she's going to sing to Henry Kuppen. Now, Henry Kuppen, we're interviewing him today. He's the director of Terra Nostra. Lovely man. We love the Dutch. The Dutch love the English. It's brilliant. But basically, what I've got to do is try and find her before she creates some sort of diplomatic incident. So let's have a look. Let's see. We got any familiar faces at this Christmas market? Mr. McKay. Nice to see the Institute of Charter Foresters here. Where has she got to?
Do you want some mistletoe, sir? Have some nice mistletoe.
Oh, God, no, get away from me, you horrible woman.
Wow, there's a creche. That's somebody else's slogan. You can't do that. It's cheating. I wonder where she is. I can't see her. Oh.
Events in your finest garden. Events in your finest garden. Events in your
Right, come inside. Just come inside. Now, look, it's a very nice idea, and I'm sure Henry would love it. Let's just introduce the episode. And here's a triangle. Just do the triangle instead, okay? Just remember when? Now. Oh, how many times? This one. Oh, Mama. You were brilliant, darling, brilliant. She'll never get to Blackpool.
I heard that.
Here's a clip in which Henry describes a conversation he had with landscape architects, talking about how they wanted to fill the space they've been given in a development.
So what I did about this space making, I realized myself that I need to convince the landscaper that his skills are not laid on the species selection. His skills are, how do I need to fill this space? So I challenged the landscaper to say, okay, tell me how you like to fill your space. Does it need to be a tree with an open crown? Does it need to be a tree with a nice autumn color? Or maybe nice spring flowering? How do you want this space being filled? And I'm sure that I can give you at least 10 species who have transparent crowns, and you don't see the difference between them. You don't see it. People who live there, the one who use that area, will not see it. Tell me, how do we need to fill that space? And I give the species. And that helped a lot because, we need to respect each other's level of knowledge. And I'm not the one who's a designer, but I know a lot about tree species. I can help you with that.
Well, by now you know we always do a dream scenario, so here's Henry's.
I like to make this a real Dutch dream scenario, which means that we really need to learn to respect all trees. The oldest trees in the Netherlands are maybe 400 years old. And I've got the feeling that we live a bit more than 400 years in this country. We need to update our navigation every year. Why? Because our landscape is constantly moving. That means if you are a 100-year-old tree, you're still there on the same place. It's very easily possible that there's a new landscape design or a new road designed on that place. That means we don't have a lot of respect for all trees. As a Dutch society, we really need to have more respect for all trees, based on history, but also based on all these ecosystems these trees are giving to us, because they are so valuable. And it's not just wood what is standing there, but this is history what is standing there. And especially with trees, I think we don't respect enough of this history of all trees.
Tree Lady Talk.
Okay, well, we've reached the halfway point. I'm just going to leave the restaurant for the moment and pop to the culture bar to get a drink. I think it's about time I went and joined a few of the people who you wouldn't normally expect to be in this sort of episode. Let's see if I can get the bar. Excuse me, can I just... would you mind if I... Is that for Clico? It is. Oh, fantastic. Could you just a glass would be... Oh, a new bottle? Well, yes, okay, then, go on. So beautiful. Now, quite apart from the free fizz, I know that there's a reading being done here by Gabriel Henry. Gabriel is an author, a tree photographer and a sylvologist, and he appeared in episode 9 with Dr. James Canton, Stephen Taylor and Irina Antoinette in Trees, Art and Literature. And he's doing a reading from one of his books, Tall Trees, Short Stories. And I think he's... Let me just have a look. Oh, there he is. There he is. Can I just push... Can I just get past you things? Okay. Fantastic. I think I've caught him in time. He's just about to start. Let's just listen to one of the readings that he gave from his interview with Sharon. He's doing it live here. It's fantastic.
Dr. Locum and Professor Otiv. Impressive, very impressive, commented Dr. Locum. A fundamental requirement of a doctoral thesis is that it must make an original contribution to knowledge. Yes, I think this is very impressive, and quite right that you have submitted it to the International Science Journal of Nature. Well, that may indeed be laudable, Miss Berry, but let's return again to this inconsistency in your conclusions. Did you mean to refer to a fourth approach, or was that a lazy error? Perhaps you tested another area, but because it didn't work out, you decided to remove it from your thesis. Is that it? You realise, young lady, that it is important for advancements of science that failures are recorded in equal measure to successes. As only that way, yes, there was a fourth area in my work, Eleanor blurted. There, she'd said it, and now there was no going back. Please continue, Professor Otiv wore a smug smile. Dr. Locum looked shocked, and rightly so. As internal examiner, he should have known about this. Eleanor feared that she may now have lost his trust, and as a result, his support. This was not how she'd seen the Viva going, damn it. The professor was right in saying it was a stupid error, but he had no idea about the truth, nor the scale of it. The chapel clock chimed 12. Soon her fellow students would be filing back into the college for lunch. The interview had already taken longer than she'd realised. Miss Berry, please continue. Eleanor refocused. I decided it was too contentious and perhaps too applied. What do you mean? The ultimate solution to the problem which trees face in being long-lived and immobile. Would you stop talking in riddles, Miss Berry? I was successful in bonding living wood with bioscaffold made from nanocellulose, thereby permitting a tree to be supported by an endoskeleton and successfully in joining this with an exoskeleton. If the external packages could contain carbon, perhaps they could also store the water and gases required by the tree, creating a life support system in cases where, for instance, the tree might be without those directly via its roots. By that I mean being able to survive in an alien world, deprived of the means to complete respiration and photosynthesis. The nearest analogy will be an astronaut's breathing apparatus and propulsion system. Wait a minute, interrupted Otiv. I understand where you're going with the life support system concept, but what do you mean propulsion system? Do you mean self-propulsion, as in independently mobile? Yes. Ha, shouted the elderly professor. You're trying to convince me that you managed to engineer a biorobotic solution to enable a tree to move across the landscape? I really think we should give the candidate the time to defend her work and under conducive conditions, started Dr. Locum. Sod that. Come on, Miss Berry. I demand to see evidence of this fantastical suggestion. Eleanor felt cornered. As she opened her laptop, she spoke quietly. If man has brought unprecedented rates of a changing climate upon the natural world, then I think we owe nature every effort to help it adapt. I asked myself, how could trees move themselves 250 meters north every year? So I set about designing a solution. She pressed play on the video and turned her laptop round to face her two examiners. As the sound of the first earth-shaking step vibrated through the laptop's tinny speakers, she studied their stunned faces as their jaws dropped.
Oh, I think he's got something else in store. No, he's moving over to the piano. He's leaning on the piano.
I am a humble woodsman, a woodcutter I am. I cut as much wood as my little arms would, a woodcutter I am. I am a master woodsman, a woodcutter I am. I could cut wood to make you something good, a woodcutter I am. I am a champion woodsman, a woodcutter I am. None can fell a tree.
Well, we're going to leave Gabriel there. Fantastic. It's marvellous. It's great fun. We're going to leave him. I'm going to walk back into the main restaurant, and we're just going to pick up on what Sharon said at the end of that interview when she asked him whether he thought literature had the power to change the natural world, and here's what he said.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's critically important, isn't it? I mean, they say forestry is a combination of science and art, and I think if we're ever to convey the complex messages that we need to, like the our sustainability and the future of the world, without art to bring it to life, whether it's film, painting or literature, whatever, I think it's so important because science itself is too dry and inaccessible and very often to the general public. That's what I think inspires me to write.
I think you're right. People need to hear stories to get into their heart. So it's absolutely wonderful to speak to you, and I really recommend Tall Trees short stories.
Tree Lady Talks began in August 2020, which by then was 5 months into this global pandemic. And by that time, people were realising that mental health was being affected very badly by lockdowns, and people were suddenly realising that actually nature has a massive role to play in people's mental health and well-being. And we did a mental health special. 3 of the speakers on that were Matilda van den Bosch, Punam Krishan and Claire Olver. Here's a clip from Matilda van den Bosch's interview with Sharon, when Sharon asked whether it was inherent in our nature to be out in the soil and, for example, seeing the colour green.
There are studies from the 80s showing that we have this immediate reaction to being exposed to nature with a reduction in stress hormones and cortisol and reduction of blood pressure, for example. So there would be, how shall I say, support for the theory that it is an inherent genetic predisposition for being in nature.
So what happens to our brain and our physiology when we're walking out, say, in a woodland? What studies are there to show that that is of benefit to us, including your own, of course?
So I would, when talking about what happens in the brain, there are a few studies from the early days and also more later studies. And one of the theories is, I find it interesting, we would talk about it as the perceptual fluency, that our brains are prone to react or being used to the impressions we get in nature. And this perceptual fluency would be related in particular to the patterns we see in nature. That's what the studies have shown, at least. We're talking about fractal patterns, so the sort of patterns that are repeating itself over different levels and dimensions. And what has been shown with brain imaging techniques such as the EEG is that our brains actually react in a way that would support the sort of attention restoration theory, that we get into a state, our brains get into a state where we are not sleepy, we're still alert, but not in a stressed way. So it's this fascination, this sort of, how shall I say, compatibility with the environment that our brain seems to react with in natural environments.
And Dr. Punam Krishan, an NHS GP in Glasgow, gave her take on the effect of the coronavirus.
Obviously, coronavirus is a major issue at the moment, but also the fact that people haven't perhaps been able to get outside as much as they used to. Did you notice a real correlation between people's lack of access to outdoor space and their mental well-being?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic has been really interesting in that at first everyone was quite afraid about how this would impact our quality of life. But interestingly, we started seeing people becoming more mindful of their health over this period of time, where suddenly, you know, the busyness of life that we're so used to, that is actually quite damaging and toxic to our long-term health needs. Everything slowed down, and we were then restricted to movement, and then we were gifted almost this, you know, hour a day that you could kind of go out for a walk in fresh air, and people started really capitalizing on that and prioritizing their physical health needs of, you know, going out for some exercise. But what they didn't realize was that it was the time where most of us that haven't connected with nature in a long time were having the ability to do that. So actually people became more mindful of their health, I believe, during this period of time, started looking at areas that they wanted to develop, even in terms of improving their mental well-being, taking up hobbies and new things that they've not tried. So in some ways it's been a very, very difficult time for us, but actually I think it's helped people connect with what their own health goals should be.
And this is Claire Olver with a real rallying call to people to get out and do it.
We also want to encourage the general population to get out and about, accessing nature. And I think that came about very much during the pandemic. So our aim is to get people more active more often. So that's general population getting out into the woodlands. And I suppose with us having planted nearly 10 million trees in the most one of the most urban areas of the country, there are woodlands on your doorsteps, which people have discovered during lockdown.
We're coming to the end of this highlight show, and we've got one more huge table to include. It's a big one. It's the Woodland Trust. Done in 2 parts and over 2 hours long, this quite quickly became the most popular and downloaded episode that Tree Lady Talks has ever done. And in this episode, of course, Sharon met Darren. Now, Sharon always has a little bit of a chat with the interviewee to lubricate the old larynx, as it were. And Darren mentioned that he used to be a house engineer in the 90s. Now, that's not a house engineer to do with houses, that's this. I resisted the urge, however, to stick that on the episode. Apart from Darren Morcroft, the CEO, we had John Tucker, the Director of Woodland Creation, Joe Coles, the Urban Programme Leader, David Rose, Farm Eco Chairman, and featuring on that episode also were Olivia Ransom, Naomi Tilley and Alex Lidis. This is a clip from that Darren Morcroft interview when Sharon met Darren and asked him what the mission statement was of the Woodland Trust.
Okay, so I suppose in a sentence it's to achieve a UK rich in native woods and trees for people and wildlife. And I suppose what that means is, as an organisation, we are looking to, particularly in this day and age, to tackle the sort of twin crises that we find ourselves facing as humanity, of climate change and kind of catastrophic nature loss. And I think one of the great things that particularly native trees, and what I would say in our mission, it's about being rich in native trees, not exclusively in native trees. But what they do is they provide all of the benefits that you get from trees as a powerful weapon to fight climate change and to tackle nature loss, because they can host so many other species, and they can provide the clean air, they cleanse our water, and do all of those jobs that everybody who's interested in trees knows what these things are do for us.
And then at the end, Sharon asked a question that everybody hates but seems to love answering.
Finally, what is your dream scenario?
Ooh, that's a challenging one. I think if you'd have asked me 12 months ago, I would have said it would be a government that recognised the value of trees and wanted to really upscale them in the landscape across all of what they do. So we're kind of there now. So my dream scenario in terms of what will the UK look like in 10, 20, 30 years' time, I think it will be a UK which has a really strong relationship with its woods and trees. It has a really strong relationship because they are close to people and they are delivering for wildlife. So it's good quality, it's well managed, it's really appreciated. As a dream scenario, if we get to that, and the Woodland Trust can play a role, and hopefully I can play a small role personally, then I think that would be a fantastic dream to turn into a reality.
Sharon mentioned to John Tucker that she didn't think 30,000 hectares of new woodland by 2025 was enough. In fact, she thinks that should be done every year.
It's never been more important, and in keeping with, for example, the World Economic Forum wants to plant 1 trillion trees by 2030, and our own government has set a target of 30,000 hectares of new woodlands by 2025. But really, don't we need to achieve that every year by 2050 to build us up from 13% tree cover and woodland cover to 17%? Is that of your view?
Absolutely. I mean, I guess, you could say I'm in the twilight of my career now. And it's a really exciting time to be around in the sort of the tree world. I mean, there's never been such a degree of interest in the function and the role that trees and woods can play. I think it's great having these very ambitious targets on the one hand, but I do worry about us getting into a numbers game about quantity over quality.
Well, I have to say, on behalf of the Tree Lady, who's taking a well-earned rest today, it's been a fantastic series. The joined-up thinking between all these passionate people who want to make developments really, really great for the future generations is absolutely clear for all to see. And to be honest, if I can see it, anybody can see it. I'd like to thank everybody who got involved in Series 1. We've already started doing episodes for Series 2, so please subscribe to them, download them, listen to them. They're fantastic, and they say so much about trees, the outside world, and how it helps you. She is at the Tree Lady 67 on Twitter. Sharon Hosegood Associates on Facebook. And we look forward to seeing you for Series 2. She'll be around for another set of interviews. We hope to meet up then with you.